My wife cried because she was cruel to me, and still haven't been able to stop thinking about it. Every time I told her something hurt me, she cried. She said I scared her. She said I was too serious. But I never yelled. Never even raised my voice. Then I found out she'd been cheating the whole time. While I was walking on eggshells, she was walking into someone else's bed. This is the story of how I stopped apologizing for my own pain, and started choosing peace. I've never been one to tell stories publicly. But something happened recently that I haven't been able to shake. And the weirdest part? It didn't start with a big fight or some wild discovery. It started with a joke. Just a bad one. At the wrong time. From the one person who should have known better. My wife and I were one of those whirlwind romances. Met, dated for 6 months, got married. Boom. Fast, but it felt right. We clicked in ways I'd never experienced before, like we got each other, even in the quiet moments. She was loud and funny, always cracking jokes and doing impressions, and I was not. I liked her brightness. It made me feel warmer, like I could relax into her orbit. I didn't mind being the quieter one. She lit the place up. For the most part, our 4 years together were great. Seriously. Not Instagram perfect, great, but real life solid. We were the kind of couple who could do boring stuff together, grocery runs, folding laundry, and still find ways to laugh. Except there was this one thing. A pattern, maybe. A flaw neither of us had really addressed. My wife liked to joke. And I mean joke. She'd goof around, tease, push buttons, usually mine. And while I could laugh off most of it, every so often, she'd zero in on something personal. Something I was already insecure about. And when that happened, it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like getting poked in a bruise. Usually I'd let it go. I didn't want to be the sensitive guy who couldn't take a joke. But it started to chip away at me. One joke here, another there, each one landing just a little harder than the last. Then came that night. We'd both had long days at work. I was fried. You know the kind of day where your brain's just static? That was me. She walked in a little later than I did, and we barely got a hello out before we were knee-deep in cleaning up after our dogs, who apparently hosted a full-blown mud wrestling match while we were out. The house was chaos. I was running on fumes. All I wanted was to shower, throw on sweats, and finally watch the movie she'd picked out earlier in the week. A quiet night, minimal thinking. That was the plan. But instead of pressing play on the remote, she started joking around, at my expense. She made a few comments about my appearance. Not random stuff, but the kind of things that make you flinch inside. The kind of things you try to ignore in the mirror and hope no one else notices. At first, I laughed. Out of habit. But then she doubled down. Same topic. Same smile. And I cracked. I looked at her and said, "Ow." Just one word. Quiet. Not angry. Not loud. She laughed again, brushing it off like I was playing along. But I didn't let it drop. For the first time in years, I asked her directly, "Why would you say that to me? You know that's something I'm insecure about." She blinked like I just switched the language on her. Like seriousness wasn't part of the script. "What do you mean?" she asked, confused and caught off guard. "What kind of reaction were you expecting?" I asked. Because all I heard was you making fun of something I've told you hurts. I didn't yell. I didn't move from where I was sitting. My voice was low and calm. But I didn't let it go. I wasn't trying to guilt trip her. I wasn't trying to win. I just needed to be heard. That's when everything turned. She started crying. And not like, tearing up a little because she felt bad. I mean full-on, heaving sobs. Her whole body shaking, barely able to speak through it. She said she felt like she was going to have a panic attack. That my tone scared her. That she didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do either. Because I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't moved. I hadn't done anything but express that I was hurt. So why did it feel like I just flipped the whole room upside down? And here's the thing I hate to admit, the part that makes me feel like a total monster. I started wondering if the tears were real. Not the emotion itself, because panic and sadness are real things, but the timing. The way she always seemed to cry right when someone was upset with her. The way the focus shifted so quickly from what she did to how she felt. The way my own pain seemed to vanish in the flood of hers. It wasn't the first time it had happened. After she started crying, everything else just stopped. The night froze. The mess in the living room, the dogs, the paused movie, all of it faded into the background as her sobs took over the room. I just sat there, stunned. 1 second, I tried to explain that I felt hurt. The next, I was watching my wife spiral into what she swore was a panic attack. The shift was so sudden, so overwhelming, that my own emotions, my frustration, sadness, exhaustion, got swallowed up by her distress. Again. This wasn't new. I just hadn't seen it clearly before. Because this wasn't the first time I'd brought up something that hurt me only to end up comforting her. Not just emotionally, but physically, practically. Like, getting her water, holding her hand, helping her breathe through anxiety while my own feelings remained unspoken and unsupported. And sure, some of that's marriage. Being there for each other. But when every hard conversation turns into an emotional crisis for her, I'm left wondering, when is it my turn? That night, it wasn't. I tried to talk, gently. Told her I wasn't mad. That I just wanted to understand why she thought mocking my insecurities was funny. That I needed to feel like I was safe with her, not just physically, but emotionally. She sobbed harder. Said she didn't mean to hurt me. Said she was just joking. Said she was scared of how serious I'd gotten. That part hit me like a slap. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't slamming doors. I wasn't even standing up. But apparently, just being serious was enough to send her into full-blown panic. I started wondering, had anyone ever actually held her accountable before? Or had she learned that the easiest way to end a hard conversation was to collapse under the weight of it? Here's where I started to feel like the bad guy. Because once that thought entered my head, that maybe this was a pattern, I couldn't unthink it. I kept wondering, was this panic real? And it makes me feel awful to even ask. Because anxiety is real. Panic attacks are real. I've seen them. I've had them. I know what they can do to someone. But hers always happened at convenient times. Right after a confrontation. Right after she said something hurtful. Right when the attention was shifting away from her, or towards something uncomfortable. And I hate myself for questioning it. I do. But I couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did she. I spent most of it rubbing her back while she cried, holding her while she shook. And the entire time, I kept hearing my own voice in the back of my head whispering, "You didn't do anything wrong. So why do you feel like you did?" By morning, nothing had changed. We didn't talk about it. Not really. She acted like we just had a weird night and everything was fine now. But I wasn't fine. And for the first time, I let myself admit that. The day after the breakdown, the silence was louder than her sobs. She made coffee like nothing had happened. Played her usual morning playlist. Chatted about the weather. It was like she'd taken a giant emotional eraser to the night before. I went along with it, out of habit, not forgiveness. Because that's what we do, right? We move past things for the sake of normalcy. We pretend the hurt didn't happen so we can make it through the workday, or get through dinner, or avoid the awkwardness of actually addressing what's wrong. But something had shifted in me. I couldn't unhear her jokes. I couldn't unfeel the way my own pain had been steamrolled by her reaction. And I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, this had been happening longer than I realized. At work, I was distracted. Kept zoning out during meetings. Staring at emails for 10 minutes before remembering what I was supposed to reply. My coworkers noticed. Asked if I was okay. I smiled and lied. Said I was just tired. But it was more than that. I was unraveling. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way that anyone could see. But quietly. Like a thread pulling free from a sweater. Slowly. Relentlessly. That night, I tried to bring it up again. We were lying in bed, backs to each other. The kind of silence that used to feel safe now felt loaded. "Hey," I said quietly. She didn't respond, but I knew she was awake. "Can we talk about what happened the other night?" Still nothing for a beat. Then. "I really don't want to go through that again." Her voice was flat. Tired. I didn't push. Because I knew what going through that meant, me expressing how I felt, and her falling apart again. And I didn't have it in me to do another night of emotional CPR while my own feelings lay on the floor. So I stayed quiet. Again. In the days that followed, I started noticing the little things more. How she'd crack jokes about me in front of friends and laugh the loudest, even when no one else did. How she'd shut down any conversation that didn't center around her day, her stress, her worries. How she'd default to panic the moment someone asked her to be accountable for anything. And suddenly, it wasn't just about me. It was everyone. Her boss. Her sister. Her friends. Anytime someone expressed hurt or frustration, she'd spiral. And somehow, they'd end up comforting her. It was like watching a magician pull off the same trick over and over, except once you know how it works, you can't unsee the strings. But here's the worst part. I still loved her. Still cared. Still wanted her to be okay. But I was starting to realize that loving someone doesn't mean you have to accept being hurt. And caring for someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself on the altar of their comfort. A few nights later, I sat alone in the living room long after she'd gone to bed. I stared at the paused home screen on our TV, the same one we'd scrolled past 1,000 times, and thought about calling someone. A friend. My brother. Maybe a therapist. I didn't. Instead, I just sat there in the glow of the screen, wondering when exactly I'd started believing that love meant always being the one to absorb the blow. I wasn't raised that way. My parents didn't scream or slam doors. But they weren't pushovers either. My dad taught me to be patient. My mom taught me to be kind. Neither of them taught me that kindness meant losing yourself. That patience meant tolerating being undermined. And yet here I was, weeks into pretending I was fine. Still afraid to rock the boat. Still worried that telling the truth would make me the villain. Still stuck. That week, I did something I hadn't done in years. I Googled relationship counseling. Not for us. For me. Not because I was ready to leave. But because I needed to talk to someone who wouldn't cry the second I said, "I'm hurting." I didn't even book an appointment right away. Just opened a few tabs and let them sit there on my laptop for days. Like tiny digital reminders that I was still allowed to want more than this. Still allowed to feel overwhelmed. Still allowed to want to feel safe too. And just like clockwork, while I was silently processing all of that, my wife had another meltdown. This time, over work. She called me crying on her lunch break, saying she couldn't take the stress, that her manager was being unreasonable, that everything was closing in on her. She said she didn't know how she was going to make it through the day. I left work early. Again. I sat with her on the couch for hours. Got her tea. Held her hand. Cancelled our dinner plans. It was like muscle memory. And yet, even as I comforted her, I couldn't stop thinking, when was the last time someone dropped everything for me? Later that night, after she'd calmed down and fallen asleep, I pulled out my laptop again. This time, I booked the appointment. Not marriage counseling. Just individual therapy. Because I needed to hear myself talk out loud. Because I needed to remember who I was when I wasn't managing someone else's crisis. The therapist's office was quiet. Not the creepy kind of quiet, just still. Calming. I stared at a wall of books and a plant I'm 90% sure was fake, trying not to freak out about what I was even doing there. When the session started, I didn't jump right into my marriage. I talked about work. About stress. About being tired all the time. But after 10 minutes of circling around it, I finally said it. I feel like I'm not allowed to have emotions in my own relationship. The word surprised even me. But once they were out, I couldn't stop. I talked about the crying. The panic attacks. The way every disagreement ended with me apologizing even when I wasn't wrong. The way I always felt like I had to walk back my own boundaries just to keep the peace. The therapist nodded. Said it sounded like I'd been in caretaker mode so long, I'd lost track of whether I even needed care myself. I left that first session shaken but lighter. Not fixed. But seen. After therapy, everything felt different. Not because anything had actually changed, but because I started noticing what had always been there. Like how I flinched every time she raised her voice, even in excitement. How I waited to gauge her mood before deciding if I could bring something up. How I edited myself constantly, trying to predict whether something I said might trigger a breakdown. I noticed how often I swallowed my own frustration. How often I went to bed sad, just so she wouldn't feel guilty. It was like I'd been living in this fog and therapy handed me a flashlight. And suddenly, I couldn't unsee the imbalance. One night, we were folding laundry. Innocent stuff. She made another one of those comments about my appearance, half laughing, expecting me to brush it off. And I didn't. That's not funny. I said it flatly. Not angrily. Just firmly. She froze. Her face changed instantly. The joy dropped. Her mouth opened, and I knew what was coming before she said a word. I didn't mean it that way, why are you being so sensitive? I just walked away. Didn't engage. Didn't soothe her. Didn't chase her when the tears started. And she didn't know what to do with that. We started spending less time together. Not in a Cold War kind of way, just slowly drifting. She was still emotional, still had panic attacks, still called me crying. But something in me had gone quiet. It's hard to explain what it feels like to fall out of sync with someone you thought you'd always love. It's like losing a language you once spoke fluently. I still cared about her. Still didn't want her to suffer. But I couldn't keep being the translator for both of us anymore. Then came the call. From a guy I didn't know. He said he worked with my wife. That he needed to talk to me. That it was important. I stepped outside, heart pounding. And he told me she was cheating. He didn't know she was married. He thought she was single. He only found out when someone at work mentioned her husband, and he confronted her. And when she didn't come clean right away, he did his own digging. He sent me screenshots. Texts. Photos. Proof. I didn't even get angry. I just shut down. It was like something inside me disconnected. Like my heart had already gone through the breakup, and now the facts were just catching up. I packed a bag. Grabbed the dog. Left a note. Then sent her a message. I know. I'll be contacting a lawyer. Please do the same. She called. Left voicemails. Sobbed. Said she didn't know what I was talking about. Then slowly started admitting bits of truth over text. Trickle truth. I didn't respond. Because what was there left to say? The marriage was already over. She just confirmed it. I crashed on my friend's couch for a while. I'd never lived alone. Not really. Always had roommates or a partner. The silence was deafening at first. But then it became peaceful. I didn't have to brace for tears. Didn't have to manage anyone's mood. Didn't have to apologize for being serious. And slowly, I started to breathe again. Not just shallow survival breaths, but real ones. The kind that fill your lungs and make you remember what being okay feels like. I talked to people. My brother. My old college roommate. My therapist. I told them everything. And no one said, "You're overreacting." No one said, "She didn't mean it." They said, "I'm sorry." They said, "That sounds exhausting." They said, "I'm proud of you for leaving." And I cried harder than I had the day I found out. Because being believed is a kind of healing. Even now, some days, I still feel guilty. I wonder if I abandoned someone in crisis. I wonder if I gave up too soon. I replay the panic attacks. The tears. The apologies. And then I remember, I didn't walk away because she was broken. I walked away because I was breaking too. And one of us was trying to get better. We're taught that love means staying. Through everything. No matter what. But that's not love. That's martyrdom. Love has boundaries. Love has accountability. Love is not supposed to feel like drowning every time you speak up for yourself. Small update. The dog? He's doing great. He sleeps on my bed now. Follows me around like a shadow. She never asked about him. Not once. I think that says more than any apology ever could. If you're in a relationship where you feel invisible, where your emotions are always second to theirs, where accountability feels like a threat, please hear this. You are not crazy. You are not dramatic. You are not the villain for wanting to feel safe, heard, and respected. Healing isn't linear. Some days, I feel free. Other days, I feel like a ghost of who I used to be. But every day, I feel a little more me. And that's enough. Strangely, I'm not bitter. I still believe in love. I just believe in the kind that doesn't require me to shrink. The kind that doesn't weaponize tears. The kind that knows a joke isn't funny if it leaves bruises. Her panic was real. I don't doubt that. But it was never mine to carry. And pretending it was almost destroyed me. I didn't get closure. Not the clean, dramatic, movie kind. But I got peace. And sometimes, that's better. Sometimes, the best ending is just a quiet room. A loyal dog. And no one asking you to apologize for finally telling the truth. Not every villain yells. Not every hero fights. Sometimes, survival looks like packing a bag, taking the dog, and never looking back. If you've ever felt invisible in your own relationship, this story was for you. Hit subscribe for more real stories that say the quiet part out loud. Be safe. Be kind. Especially to yourself.